American Giant makes great clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, and more right here in the U.S. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order with code STAPLE20. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, code STAPLE20.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Comm Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can always read my work on ESPN.com. I'll have daily training camp updates on ESPN.com. Any news that breaks on ESPN.com. So always check there and you get my reports from every day, as well as every other NFL Nation reporter. So learn about this team, but everybody else that they're going to play. So good one-stop shopping for your training camp needs. And don't forget, I'm going to be doing training camp reports after every practice this summer. So check back every day. We'll get it up as soon as possible. And there you go. Now today, this is going to go up before we know. Today, the veterans reported, but they're still reporting. They still have to do a conditioning test as I tape this. So when you see this, they would have already probably, or see or hear this, they would have already had their conditioning test. And any news about guys going on the physically unable to perform list, check on ESPN or on my Twitter feed at John_Keim, because I will have already recorded this. And some of you for YouTube won't hear this till much later. So just know that any of that news, we'll check for ESPN.com or just my Twitter feed. So there you go. So let's get today, right? The veterans are reporting. Training camp is going to start on Wednesday at 9 a.m. That's the first practice. And today we talked to Dan Quinn and Adam Peters for about a little more than 30 minutes in a press conference. So that was a pretty good time, around 30 minutes, pretty good time, get some answers. Not a whole lot of revealing stuff, but some interesting things to discuss nonetheless. So let's start with, I'm just going to run through some of the topics they talked about, what it means, etc. So the first one is Jaden Daniels starting. Now I had the first question asked about that because obviously that's important. Listen, we all know he's going to start. And even Dan Quinn said it's no secret. And what he was referring to, it's no secret that he's going to play at some point. But the question is when. So they're not going to name him as a starter, and which I'll get into that in a minute. But that's nuts and bolts of this. Not going to name him as a starter. This is a process. They're going to rotate him with Marcus Mariota, much like they did in the spring in the OTAs. Mariota took a lot of first team work. In minicamp, it was Daniels taking the first team work, and that's all he worked with. And as I say, when we saw it, but we saw all the snaps. So that's what he did. So look for more like that. Listen, in many ways, this competition is between Jaden Daniels and Jaden Daniels, because when he's ready, he will be named the starter. There is no rush for this. They have two joint practices. Let's see where Daniels is at after the Jets joint practice, after the Jets preseason game, after the Dolphins joint practice, after the Dolphins preseason game. There's no hurry, because the season doesn't start till September 8th. As long as you have him then, and if he's proving to the guys in the field, he'll know, they'll know, the players will know who the starter is. So this is really a semantics thing, and I know Dan Quinn is huge on competition. So he's gonna, every time you ask him about this, he's gonna refer back to, hey, this is how he wants to treat every position. Now, clearly, John Allen, Daron Payne, pretty entrenched in their spot. Sam Cosmi, he's gonna start. Bobby Wagner. So there's some guys. You say Terry McLaurin, starters. You know what I mean? So there's some guys that clearly they're in a different class. But for someone like Daniels just coming in, make him earn it. And that's okay. The guy who likes that the most, I think, is Jaden Daniels. And I will say, any fan listening to this should go back to the last few years here. Sam Howell, Dwayne Haskins. Now, maybe Sam Howell still beats out Jacoby Brissett for the job. And it's not like Brissett was just awesome in camp and should have had the job. That I can't say that was the case. But I don't think a guy like Quinn would have said after the season, hey, yeah, we're rolling with Sam Howell, and going into camp. And I think there would have been just going to be a competition and see where it goes, because that's how, and with Dwayne Haskins here, I know from Rivera talked about this a lot. He regretted the way that unfolded, but part of that was the COVID year and the way they didn't have the spring work. So they wanted to give him as many reps as they could, but there was no real competition. And I think you bring out the best when there's competition, when guys don't assume But I also, like I said, from Jaden Daniels' standpoint, he doesn't assume anything. And that's what I like. That's one of the things I like about him and why I think he's got that shot for some long-term success, is because the approach and the mindset that he has, it falls right into suit with the way Dan Quinn is talking about here. They want him to win the job. He's going to be the starter at some point. Understand that. The question is when. And even Adam Peters said, this, you want it to happen naturally. I mean, Adam Peters has been around young quarterbacks in Denver, in San Francisco. Let it happen naturally. Let them be ready, because the worst thing you could do is say, going into camp, like, he's our starter. Then you get into camp, you have these joint practices, realize, oh crap, maybe he's not that guy. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that would have happened, but I think it's like, just see where it is, right? Let it go and give them both some reps. And I think they'll do that. I think they'll rotate some. I don't know how much, but that's going to be the case. And somebody asked him, I think Sam Forty asked him about, like, why this approach. And it's not about motivation. It's really about let it happen naturally. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, and I think, listen, the more you introduce competition at any position, the better off you are. And a team that has not had a winning season since 2016 should be all about competition. Not a soul should feel safe. Even if you're entrenched, you still need to prove it to this staff. And, the only way you do it is by going out and competing. And I think the guys that I talked earlier, who are the McLaurin, Payne, Allen, those guys, they'll do that. Cosme, they'll do that. But I think, you're 4-13 last year. No playoff wins since 2005. What they did in the past didn't work. So the approach has to be this, right? Period. End of sentence. And I think one of the things they said they'll look for with Daniels and that is about the connection he has with teammates, the chemistry he has with teammates, how he's taking command on the field. So I think all those things will play into this as much as anything else. And the other thing that they talked about too, and Dan Quinn talked, is that this season is a lot about finding their identity. And so I want to, for a minute, I'm going to talk about this. Obviously, you want to go out and win games. They know they want to win. Like that is what they're here to do. That's what they're being paid money to do, is to bring a winner to Washington. But this is not a one-year overnight process. This roster was not stacked, and it was only about, some of the coaching that got them there. The coaching can be a lot better, and I'm curious to see the impact on that. But the roster needed to work as well. And our Jeremy Fowler from ESPN did a top 10 list for each position, and that's based on talking to coaches, executives, players, whomever. And this team, I don't know that they had a top 10 player anywhere. Maybe I think Terry McLaurin was the only guy that would have been in the top 10. I think Payne and Allen were like honorable mentions. And I have to go back over the list. The bottom line is this roster is not viewed favorably outside anywhere, right? And so I think that's why I say it's establish your program, establish your identity as a team. I never felt like they found their identity over the last 4 years. Never felt like that, whether it was an offense or even as a defense. Like, it just switched too much, and there was too much vacillation and success on defense. But just offensively, it never felt like they found an identity. And I didn't feel like they found one as a team either. There were sometimes I felt like they were a resilient team, especially in the first couple of years. But, last year, no. But the first couple of years, there were examples of that, I think, in a few cases, right? But I never felt like overall that identity took hold. And so if you can come in and establish your identity as a franchise and as a team, that's going to be a good thing. Now, you don't want to establish identity and only win 4 games. I mean, heck, you could win 7 or 8 games and establish that identity. Maybe you win a little bit more if certain things break right. But you want to say, this is who you're going to be. Announce to everybody else, like, when this roster keeps getting better and adding talent, this identity is going to look even better with better talent. Like, that would be again, that's not to say like, okay, 4 or 5 wins and identity. No, that's not good enough. I think if you're doing it right, you can get to that 7-win mark. And then it's like, then from where can you go? So I just think, but long-term, I've always told you, I like the approach long-term, and this fits into that. And I also think you have an owner, a GM, and a coach who are aligned with that vision for the approach. I think we all know that you had a previous owner who wasn't really about long-term building, despite whatever he would say, maybe tell people, you knew that, hey, ultimately it's about, you got to show more now. And so I think I kind of like this approach, definitely like this approach, but I like the aligned vision and and just who they have in charge, it's so much better set up for that long-term success than it ever has been, for sure. Will Jaden Daniels climb to the top of the NFC East? Will the Commanders zip past the competition? We'll have to wait until the season starts to see, but you can get a head start on the competition this summer at the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring. Named the #1 aerial adventure park in North America by USA Today, the country's largest ropes course and zipline park is now open 7 days a week. Located in the heart of Montgomery County, Maryland, the Adventure Park offers climbing, ziplining, axe throwing, food, and more. Experience adventure day or night with your family, or leave the kids at home for one of the exclusive Keep It Lit adult-only events. These summer date nights are perfect, featuring glow lights, music, fire pits, and endless adventure. With challenges anywhere from beginner to expert, there is something for all skill levels. Not looking to scramble through the trees? Keep your feet planted in the pocket and throw a perfect spiral at axe throwing. You can throw at traditional targets or play any number of interactive games. You can even upload your own image. Anytime you're thinking about reaching new heights, make sure you know before you go. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is the only ACCT accredited park in Maryland or Virginia. So there you have it, folks. The best climbing, ziplining, and axe throwing in the country right here in the DMV. Reserve your adventure today at www.theadventurepark.com/Kime. A couple things that Quinn was talking about, like what are some early changes you might see. One of the things he said that he did differently this year was he brought the rookies in early, and they came in last week. They came in and they did the they had a couple walkthroughs, but a lot of classroom stuff to make sure that refresher and then get ahead. So when they get on the field with the veterans on Wednesday, they can be at a better spot. Are they going to be the same speed? Well, maybe not, but they're at a better spot because they're able to do that. The other thing he said they might do more of early is more red zone work. And I noticed that in the spring, like a lot of red zone work, a lot of situational work, because the NFL is situational football. And the red zone in particular is where third downs and red zone, it's where you make your money as an offense. And so the better you can become there and the more work you put in there, the better off you can become. So that's one thing that's a little bit different as well. For Quinn, that's one thing he said he has done differently too. And there's obviously going to be a lot of roster turnover. I did an initial projection for the 53-man roster that ran, I think that was on ESPN Plus maybe. But when I looked at I think it's around 55% of the roster was new compared to last year, and could be more. So anyway, Adam Peters was asked about the Brandon Ayuk situation. There's a couple of things. One, not about, hey, would you trade for him? He can't talk about guys that are under contract. So that he's not going to answer that question, but more so about the still shot that Ayuk posted from a Commanders practice that had Jaden Daniels in there. So clearly he's getting from Jaden Daniels. All Peters would say is that they dealt with it internally and it's over. So I don't know that they view it as some huge deal, but they dealt with it right away. And it was never a good look for Daniels to have his guy do that. I haven't heard bad things about Ayuk as a person. I know what he's doing is trying to gain leverage here, but you shouldn't be using your pal to do so. And Daniels shouldn't allow that to happen. So whatever, it's over. And, they love Jaden Daniels. That's all that matters. And again, this season to me will be about patience and process. And you have the right people to execute that desire, that mindset, to see it be built the right way. I know for fans, it can be very tough, man. I don't know if you can hear how loud it is out here. We're right by Dulles Airport. So if you hear that's a plane flying overhead, I apologize. This is a noisy place at times during the day, and I like to record from out here to get it out sooner, get you some visuals from the background with those watching. But man, does it get noisy. You got people cutting the grass, you got the planes. So anyways, patience, process, all that's good. The other thing, Johnny Newton placed on the non-football injury list last week. It's because the injury he was suffered in college. They feel like it's going to be sooner rather than later. This is just being cautious, making sure he's not ready to play or to come out there just yet. but they definitely know that he needs to get in there to work with guys. He lost his spring. That sets you behind. So for sure. So they know, but they feel like it's going to be sooner rather than later that he gets back out there. And so there you go. The other thing that Quinn and Peters talked about is just like the feeling of energy from the players and just for the start of training camp and how excited that the group, even those returning, how excited they feel. And like some guys were coming back early just to get out here or just to be here early, which doesn't always happen. And Adam Peters said that this is the most excited he's ever been for training camp. Now, clearly, some of them is because he's the guy in charge. Like that dude has worked nonstop. He took some vacation this year, but he worked pretty much the whole time. So it's not really a vacation, but that's going to be like that for that first year. Until you establish things, you're not going to be able to really get away, especially somewhere where there's a lot of work to be done. And that's why I think it's important that they hired guys like Lance Newmark, and guys like that, just because you need people you can trust, who you respect, that are working under you, that can then help you do what you need to do. And well, one little nugget, they have the number 2 waiver. They're number 2 on the waiver list. So that can help when guys become available. Kick returns. I think one of the interesting things to watch this summer is how teams handle the new kickoff rule, because I've heard from a couple special teams coaches and just, curious about how people are approaching it. And on the return game, it's a little bit more, and even I think either Pat Peters or Quinn said this, but even watching this, and I think I did talk about this in the spring, how it looks like more like a traditional running back would do well in these situations, because it's really, it's coming up and it's setting up a block, making a cut, and then influencing guys like the guys blocking have to be a little bit more quick with their footwork and just being able to mirror people. So I'm curious to see how that evolves, and then who does that. I know Eckler was working with that in the spring. And did a nice job, but it's spring, there's no pads, but somebody with his skill set could do well in this situation. The other thing that they said is that you don't know how, like traditionally in a kickoff, you're fielding the ball like right around the goal line or whatever, but it's coming through the air. He said, now the way teams might kick, you may have to be, he said, like you may have to be a center fielder, you might have to be a shortstop, and how you feel that there may be teams that kick it more and maybe try to, maneuver the ball, like put some spin on it or whatever, and kick away from some guys, or kick it and you may have to feel it off the ground, whatever. So that's why it's going to be interesting to see how this develops. And the other thing that I think it was Peters talked about, the communication, one of the things he liked about, and I think one thing that they felt really good about where the spring was at, was the cohesion of the group and the way they communicated, and just the way the guys got to know one another, et cetera, that they felt like they were ahead of the game in that regard. And speaking of being ahead, one of the things that Quinn said is that there may be some positions that are viewed one way outside the building that are viewed much differently inside the building. My sense would be, he's talking about the offensive line. And the hard part is, in the offensive line in the spring, you're not really getting a good feel for what guys can do, because it's the underwear Olympics. It's helmet and no pads. But I think they feel better internally than people do externally about the offensive line. And some of that is, and I've talked about this, some of it is how you're going to be used, what you're being asked to do. If you have a line that is not great at setting up a pass protection, don't have them pass protect on 70% of the snaps. It is just, the further we get from last year, the more ludicrous it becomes. And so I think one thing Quinn emphasizes, and he said this during this answer, is you find out what guys can do and you build around that. Find out their strengths. Now, a lot of coaches say that. Not everybody does that, though. And I think that's why I'll be curious to, do they do that? How much does the scheme help with that offensive line? And I think the internal, especially guard, with Allegretti, Biotish, and Cosme, I think they're going to be pretty strong. I think that could really kind of help that run game. And the big, Wiley, I think he's going to have to play better. We know that. I think left tackle, I think they feel better about that than people outside do. We'll see if they're right or not. But I do think that they feel better about the line than a lot of people do on the outside. And some of that, of course, is because of what happened last year. So many factors involved in that, including young quarterback, a line that needed to do better, and then play calling and scheme, or whatever, play calling more. So, I think there's ways that you can mitigate some of the mistakes. You can't cut it all out. At some point, the left tackle, the right tackle, they've got to sit there, block one-on-one, and win that battle. because if you don't do that, then there's going to be trouble. But I think my guess and sense is that they feel better there. And then also with tight end. And tight end is funny because I don't view that as a weakness. I think view it as a curiosity because of Zach Ertz. Can he last 17 games? Or if he has to miss time, is it just very little? Ben Sinnott, I like what I think he's going to do. I like John Bates. The wild card would be, does Cole Turner show anything? Armani Rogers, Colson Yankoff, the undrafted guy, like that's a guy that, could he make the roster? So I think they feel better about that spot than maybe, and I don't know how you feel about that, but I think they feel pretty good about that position as well. So I think secondary cornerback, I think that's still one to watch. I'm going to still have questions about that going into the season because I'm not confident that they have the corners. I have a feeling that next year, the 2025 starting corners might be elsewhere right now. And so that's just going into the season, see what the impact on the coaching is on St. Juste and Forbes. Can they improve? But, going into camp, I should say, that's where you're at with that. They're going to have to prove quite a bit that last year was about, because again, St. Juste, he progressed. And then last year he did not. How much of that was him versus coaching? We'll find out this summer. And then of course, Forbes. The other thing Dan Quinn talked about was leadership. He said that one of the ways he's evolved with his leadership is when he was younger or earlier in his coaching career, I think he felt like he had to be that leader, right? He had to be the guy. I think as he's gotten older, he feels like he has to help develop the leaders, whether on the coaching staff, on the roster, because when you develop more leaders, then you develop a better program. And I remember, I'm an Ohio State guy, Urban Meyer, when they won the national title back in 2014, talked about that. He said, usually there's 10 guys who are strong leaders, 80 guys in the middle, and 10 who are just at the bottom. And he used to put so much emphasis or work into trying to get the bottom 10 into that upper 80 that he realized like they weren't worth the effort. So he focused more on getting more of those 80 into the top 10. And when you get you can get 20 of those guys, 10 more guys, 15 more guys to jump up, now you have something. And that's one thing that I think Quinn will try to do with this group. And that's why they brought in, that's why, listen, what he just said, and then you go out and bring in those leaders, it makes sense. So there you go. That's it. That's my wrap up for today. 9 a.m. tomorrow, I will have a training camp report out sometime in the afternoon. First practice, no pads, not going to be in pads for several days. First fan practice will be on Sunday. So I'll be back Wednesday with more report. Talk to you next time.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.